news here. My favourite royal, Prince Louie, is making headlines again.
Prince Louie is stealing the show at Trooping the Color once again. Young Prince adorably stealing hearts. Here's a look.
It began as a sweet moment with little Prince Louie at the piano. He played energetically for the crowd, his cheeks red and fingers shaking. But the room fell silent when a famous pianist laughed loudly and cruelly. What he didn't realize was that Princess Charlotte was watching. Her sharp reply quickly silenced everyone in the room. What led to this? The atmosphere was calm, different from the usual fancy royal events. Quiet conversations and gentle laughter filled the room, creating a sense of closeness. Often under public scrutiny, the royal family appeared relaxed and set aside their formalities for this personal occasion. Guests, a mix of friends and family, dressed casually but still looked elegant. It was a rare moment when the royal family seemed more like a regular family than a symbol of tradition. Prince Louie, one of the youngest children there, stood out. At just 7 years old, he had recently started learning the piano, and this was his big moment. He wasn't playing a complex piece, just a simple tune he had practiced for weeks. For Louis, this was everything. He had spent afternoons at the piano, working through mistakes and building the courage to perform without help. Now, wearing a navy blazer and polished shoes with his hair combed neatly, he waited for his name to be called. He kept glancing at the piano and rubbing his hands together, showing the nervousness of a young child. There was something fragile yet hopeful about him. In the front row, Princess Charlotte sat quietly, focused on him. At 9, she had the calm presence of someone older. She noticed every detail, Louis's tense shoulders and nervous habit of chewing his bottom lip. She didn't bring attention to it, but didn't need to. Charlotte had always been steady, quiet, but protective. Louis glanced her way once, and she gave him the slightest nod. That was enough for him to feel supported. She wore a soft blue dress with a white cardigan, her hands resting in her lap. She didn't speak much, but her presence was comforting. She smiled at Louis, and that look helped him stand taller. Then the guest of honor walked in, a famous pianist known worldwide. He had played in big cities and large concerts. Today he was there to watch and guide the children. People respected him and whispered his name as he passed by. He wore a black suit and shiny shoes, his hair slicked back. He seemed serious but polite, nodding at a few guests and shaking hands with the organizers. However, his eyes revealed a different story when he scanned the room. His smile faded slightly as he looked at each child. He checked the piano closely before stepping back with his hands folded. Some adults clapped when he entered, while others smiled. No one noticed his quiet smirk or how quickly he judged the children. But Charlotte did. She kept watching him, sensing something was off. She said nothing, but her focus shifted to ensure Louis was treated kindly. This event aimed to support young kids. It was a space for them to try something new without fear. There were no scores or trophies, only music and encouragement. Most people understood this. Charlotte looked back at her brother, who stood near the piano, waiting for his name to be called. His fingers fidgeted at his sides. He glanced at her again, and she smiled back. He took a deep breath and waited. But this peaceful afternoon was about to change, surprisingly. Charlotte paid attention to everything, preparing to do something that would shock everyone in the room. The incident. Prince Louis stood up slowly when he heard his name. His heart beat faster. He took small steps toward the piano, trying to stay calm. His shoes tapped lightly on the floor. Everyone was watching him, but it didn't feel scary. The mood was soft and gentle. He reached the piano bench and sat down. His legs dangled over the floor. He took a deep breath and placed his fingers on the keys. His music teacher had told him to sit straight and stay relaxed. He tried to remember those tips. His hands shook a little, but he was ready. Louis began to play. The song was simple, a beginner piece with short notes and an easy rhythm. He practiced it many times at home after school. Sometimes he played it perfectly. Other times he made mistakes. That was okay. He was learning. The notes came out uneven. 1 or 2 keys were a bit off. A few were too soft, but he didn't stop. He kept going, one note at a time. He focused on the keys and wanted to finish. That was what mattered to him. When the song finished, he lifted his hands from the piano. He looked around the room. There was a pause. Then polite clapping followed. Some guests smiled. Others nodded. A few whispered kind words. Louis smiled back. He felt proud. He had done his best. But not everyone felt the same. A famous pianist stood in the corner. He watched the whole performance with his arms crossed. His face showed no emotion. He looked at Louis, then let out a chuckle. He leaned toward someone beside him and said softly, "At least he's royalty. He won't need to live off this." His words were meant to hurt. They were intended to sound clever, but they weren't. Charlotte heard everything. She turned her head slightly, her smile faded. Her eyes were fixed on the pianist. She stayed quiet, but her face showed how she felt. She didn't need to speak. She looked back at Louis, who was now walking toward her. He still had a proud smile and hadn't heard the comment. He thought everything went well. He had no idea someone made fun of him. Charlotte sat up straighter. Louis sat down beside her. She leaned in and said, "That was nice." Her voice was calm and clear. Louis beamed and reached for a small cookie from the plate nearby. Charlotte's eyes returned to the pianist. He was already talking to someone else, looking relaxed as if he had done nothing wrong. But she had seen it all. The smirk, the glance, the quiet insult aimed at her brother. She didn't look away. She stared at him, thinking hard. She disliked people who acted nice but made fun of others when no one was watching. She stayed quiet for now. But something inside her felt heavy. Not fear, not sadness. It was something substantial. She didn't raise her voice or frown. But inside, she made a decision. Louis still smiled beside her, proud of his performance. That was what he needed to feel, and Charlotte ensured that. But in her mind, she was already planning what to do next. Charlotte heard every cruel word, and her calm expression slowly changed to something determined. What she decided to do next would change the mood of the entire event and leave everyone stunned. Charlotte's response. Charlotte sat quietly next to her brother Louis. She kept her back straight and hands in her lap. On the outside, she looked calm, but inside she felt tense. The man's words troubled her. He had made fun of Louis, as if Louis didn't matter. He didn't understand how hard Louis worked. Charlotte disliked the man's laughter and how he joked with others. He didn't care that Louis tried his best. She felt her jaw tighten, but didn't show her anger. She had seen people like him before, those who made mean comments and smiled as if it were okay. This time, it hurt her heart because it was about Louis. Charlotte glanced at Louis. He held a cookie and smiled to himself, proud of performing on the piano. He didn't mind missing a few notes. He had done it. She smiled at him and said, "You did well." Louis nodded, happy with her praise, then returned to his cookie. Then Charlotte stood up, keeping her face calm. She took a deep breath and walked across the room. People noticed her, and the room quieted down. The pianist stood in the corner talking to someone. He looked up when Charlotte approached. His smile seemed forced now. Charlotte stopped in front of him and looked directly into his eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said, polite but clear. He nodded and said, "Of course." She paused, then spoke again. "I heard what you said about my brother." The man blinked, unsure how to respond. "He's 7, Charlotte continued. "He played today because he wanted to try. That matters." The pianist shifted a bit, looking uncertain. "You were 7 once," she said. "You didn't play perfectly either, but someone gave you time. Someone believed in you." Her voice remained strong and calm. The man looked down, losing his smile. He said nothing. Charlotte didn't wait for him to reply. She nodded, turned around, and walked back to her seat. Louis looked up as she sat beside him. "What did you say?" he asked with a grin. "Nothing much," she replied. "I was just being polite." She grabbed a cookie and took a bite, not wanting to make a big deal or upset Louis. The room slowly filled with sound again. People started to whisper. Some looked at Charlotte. Others nodded at her. They had heard her stand up for her brother without making a scene. The pianist stayed quiet in the corner, staring at his hands. He looked upset, as if he was reflecting on what had just happened. Charlotte didn't look back at him. She had said what she needed to say. She didn't raise her voice or cry or blame anyone, but her words were strong and impactful. Louis continued to enjoy his cookie, happy and proud, just like he should be. His sister always had his back. However, Charlotte had one more surprise plan to change the situation and leave everyone speechless. The turning point. The room had settled down. People were drinking tea, chatting softly, and pretending nothing had happened. But something had changed. Charlotte had spoken up, and her words had reached everyone. She wasn't finished yet. A few minutes later, someone asked her if she wanted to say a few words about Louis's performance. It was meant to be a polite gesture, a quick moment to thank the guests. But Charlotte had more to say. She stood up again, smooth and steady. All eyes were on her. She walked to the front and smiled, a calm and honest smile. "Thank you all for being here today," she began. "My brother has worked hard. He plays every morning before school. Even when he's tired or has homework, he still gets up and tries." People started nodding. A few looked at Louis, who sat up straighter in his chair. "We all start somewhere," Charlotte continued. "No one is perfect the first time. Not even the best musicians. It takes effort and heart." Her words were gentle but firm. She reminded everyone what growing, learning, and supporting one another means. Then, without saying more, she turned to the piano. At first, people thought she was passing by, but she pulled out the bench and sat down. Her dress fell neatly around her as she placed her hands on the keys. The room went quiet. She played a short piece, only a minute long, but each note was clear. Her fingers moved easily, light but focused, and her face stayed calm, like she often played for herself. When the last note faded, there was a pause. Then people started to clap, light at first, then louder. A few royals joined in, and some guests did too. They weren't clapping just for her skill. They were clapping for the moment, how she had taken a quiet insult and turned it into something bigger and braver. Charlotte stood and nodded before returning to her seat. The pianist had watched everything with a blank face, but now he seemed smaller, like someone had shifted the attention away from him to where it belonged. Louis smiled when Charlotte sat down. "That was awesome," he whispered. Charlotte smiled back. "You're the one who started it," she said. The room felt warm now. Something genuine and honest had just happened. It fell into silence as something magical began to unfold before their eyes. Even the famous pianist was surprised by what he saw, and his attitude was about to change forever. Resolution and growth. Later that day, after the music and tea, the pianist approached Louis with a kind expression. He bent down and said, "You did well today. It takes courage to perform." Louis was surprised, and the pianist added, "Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to start anew." He handed Louis a folder of beginner music sheets. Louis accepted it, his eyes wide. "Thank you," he whispered. The pianist nodded and left, letting the moment be quiet. Charlotte watched from a distance, waiting to see Louis's reaction. When he looked at her, filled with pride, she stepped closer and said, "You did amazing." Louis grinned and said he wanted to play again next week. Charlotte promised to help him practice. At that moment, something changed for everyone. Charlotte showed quiet strength by supporting Louis without raising her voice. The adults and guests noticed this shift. What started as a simple tea party became a lesson in courage and growth. The pianist remembered his beginnings, Louis found his voice, and Charlotte showed leadership. The music may have stopped, but the critical message lingered. Princess Charlotte revealed her heart, courage, and strength, reminding everyone why she is winning worldwide hearts.